Hello. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the, I'm not saying fourth Thursday. Oh, God, I just said fourth Thursday. This is now just the virtual open mic at Chatham Community Library. We're doing them on Wednesdays now, as you guys obviously know. And we'll be doing them on Wednesdays moving forward. I think the next one is on March 17th. I would really like to get on started. Eric, I think you are our first one up.
I'm honored to be here. And so, new strings. So I thought I love this guitar. It's a very inexpensive $60 guitar. When I was just starting out, I met John Lee Hooker at the Catacombs in Boston. And I said, wow, I want to do this. What kind of guitar should I get? And he looked at me and put his hands on my shoulders and he said, it's never the guitar, it's always the player. So I thought that was great words of advice. Went to the store the other day, got a computer new. Went to the store the other day, got a computer new. I brought it home, it looked okay, and I just plugged it in. Whole thing went up in smoke, unbelievable. Product manual, tell me what I can do. Product manual, won't you help me out of this? I picked up product manual, I tried to find the answer. I looked around all the pages, there's nothing for me there. I went back to the store, you see, I brought it all back. Scarred and burnt. My poor computer burned to a crisp. Product manual, what have you done to me? Product manual, nothing for me there. I bought another computer, just the same as before. Brought it home and I plugged it in and I went out the door. I came back, it was running fine. I opened up a file. I said, computer, do this for me. I'll be back in a while. Product manual, what have you done? Product manual. Product manual sitting on the desk. I opened it up, I looked for the answer. It was just in jest. Product manual, well, tell me what I want to know. Product manual, that just goes to show.
Yeah.
Thank you. My little song about product manuals. They never tell you what you need to know, and you can't find it anyway. So,
looks like that guitar's had a little bit of play.
Yeah, I bought it in Berea, Kentucky, when I was playing at the Kentucky Hall of Fame, and I used it relentlessly for years, and I have another one right in the back there, but it's all $60 guitar, so I spend $400 replacing the neck. Who does that?
Yeah.
Yeah, only guitar players.
Yeah.
And they're working okay. But time for one more, sir?
Well, I believe we got we actually, that was your 10. So I need to.
I'm good.
I think we probably can let you do one more because we've had a cancellation, so we might be able to stretch out and do 12 minutes or so for each.
Yeah.
We can get you another one in.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. Thank you. I'll try not to screw it up. That might be a little loud, so. High cost of living getting me down. It's getting so expensive, can't even hang around. Kids all shop at Goodwill, have lunch at Walmart. It's dinner at Family Dollar in the parking lot. I bought all that junk You sold me on TV. Those low monthly payments were just right for me. The bills just keep coming, they're clogging up the hall. In another couple of days, won't have any room at all. High cost of living getting me down. It's getting so expensive, can't even hang around. Kids all shop at Goodwill, have lunch at Walmart, have dinner at Family Dollar in the parking lot. Good job I had, gone and left town. Got a note in the mail with a $5 bill, so thanks, buddy, see you around. They're building a new plant in Juarez, Mexico. My job won't be coming back, that's what they tell me so. Tried to buy a house, that mortgage was a crime. I went to the bank, tried to get some more money, wouldn't lend me a dime. I tried to raise some money, put the wife and kids up for sale. Police came by, took me down, couldn't even make my bail. High cost of living getting me down. It's getting so expensive, can't even hang around. Kids all shop at Goodwill, have lunch at Walmart. It's dinner at Family Dollar in the parking lot. It's dinner at Family Dollar in the parking lot. It's dinner at Family Dollar in the parking lot.
Eric Summer, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much for having this, and thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is great. This is
our pleasure.
Our tax dollars at work.
Working hard.
It is.
Brian Biswas, are you ready to go?
Everybody.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, The Astronomer, another excerpt coming out later this year. I still haven't learned how to play a musical instrument, but a guitar player does make an appearance later on in this story, so you can listen for that. This could be called The Secret of Life, or maybe Secrets of Life, or maybe Thoughts of a Dying Man. Our hero is speaking to his ex-wife, who left him many years before, imagining what he might say to her if he ever saw her again. I'll warn you, this one's kind of odd. It's basically a series of images or recollections as he ruminates on his life, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, The Secret of Life. I have just discovered the secret of life, and it was quite unexpected. I've been searching my entire life for the secret of life. And when my 7th decade was drawing to a close, and I seemed no nearer to its divination, I assumed there was no longer any hope, no hope for a man with one foot in the grave. I was tired of searching. I wanted to spend the remainder of my days staring out the living room window of my home in the outskirts of Peoria, staring at the birds pecking at the feeders I dutifully filled every Sunday afternoon, gazing upon my flower garden, the garden made in the image of the one I tended when I was a child, and that meant more to me than anything in the world. But at night, At night, I search the heavens in a quest to find something, anything, that might reveal the secret of life, or that would point the way. Might it appear in the image of a planet, or a constellation, or a star? When people ask, what is the secret of life? What they really mean is, what do I have to do to be happy? And that's an altogether different question. Happiness means different things to different people. To some, it means money, the accumulation of wealth. To these people, the secret of life is to play the stock market. One can make vast amounts of money in the market, it's true, though one can also lose one's shirt. Therefore, one must be careful. Even so, with the utmost care, the most one will make is 8%, and 8% is definitely not the secret of life. Other people couldn't care less about money. To them, happiness means love. I don't really want to discuss that most fundamental of human emotions, except to say that finding love is nearly impossible. But that won't spend people from spending a lifetime trying. It's sad, for inevitably it leads to broken promises, broken homes, broken dreams. And if you think I'm speaking from experience, you're right. There are those who believe happiness lurks behind rocks. There are those who believe happiness lurks behind doors. There are those who believe happiness lies at the end of the rainbow just after the rain has cleared. There are those who aren't so sure. There are those who believe happiness isn't anywhere at all, for it's nothing but an illusion. I myself am an illusion. I became one long ago, about the time you left me for that repairman in Watertown. If the secret of life isn't happiness, what else could it be? Immortality, says the priest who has taken his vows. To live forever, whether on heaven or on earth, has its attractions, it must be acknowledged. But the search for immortality has driven multitudes into the arms of every crackpot one can imagine. The alchemist, who with a bitter incantation turns lead into gold. It's an illusion. The gold doesn't glitter. It's dull, like lead. The clairvoyant, who divines in tea leaves at the bottom of the cup that the world is about to end. An illusion. The world's not about to end. It will spin until the sun explodes, and that will not be until you and I are dead and gone. The magician who, with a wave of his hand, levitates the living. Merely an illusion. What one sees is not necessarily what is. A magician is but a thief who picks your pocket. Fame. Ah, fame. The secret of life is fame, or so many seem to believe. And it's true that to be known, recognized, and admired is unquestionably a universal desire. Why, fame even comes, in the most severe cases, with its own line of live action dolls. But the trappings of fame are also well known, as is the famous one's fate, to become the object of jealousy, ridicule, and scorn. Far better to be a common man, swallowed up by the sea of humanity, or better still, to never have existed, like I no longer exist without you. There was a woman in Las Cruces who was a ballerina. She talked endlessly of points, pirouettes, and the bar. She dreamed that one day she would be famous and dance before adoring crowds. She was a pretty woman and a very talented dancer, but I don't think she could have handled fame. In any event, she never got the chance. For one morning, she was killed when crossing the street in front of her apartment, struck dead by an automobile. She never knew what hit her, and it was better that way. Her blood flowed into the street like wine. There was a woman in Flagstaff who had been so happy once upon a time. But as the years passed, her happiness turned into sorrow, and eventually she pleaded for mercy at the hands of the man she'd married many years before. She thought he knew the secret of life, but all he knew was a blinding rage. He beat her mercilessly, beat her without meaning to beat her, for he really loved her, you see, like you really loved me once. His cold tiger eyes laid waste to her soul. There was a woman at Harvard who was a writer. She wrote many pieces, a handful of which were published in well-known magazines. But she was never satisfied with anything she wrote. She burned drafts of stories others thought were promising. She berated her husband when creativity would not flow. She'd rant and rave for hours on end. The critics said she had writer's block, would never write anything worthwhile again. One day she said, "To hell with everything," and threw herself out the window. I'll never forget that day, so gray and sad, with the mists rising up before me. When I was 18, I went to a college out west. I was young and innocent, and my head was filled with big ideas. There was a young man on campus who was a singer. He was tall and handsome, his eyes a deep blue, his dark hair long and curly. All the girls adored him. He'd play a guitar on the campus quad most evenings and in coffee houses around town on Saturday nights. He sang simple songs about love and faith. He was out to change the world, he said. He wasn't an angry man, but he was passionate. I always thought he would do great things in life, and many years later, I inquired about him. Had he found fame and fortune? Had he managed to change the world? It turned out it was neither. He died tragically one cold winter night in his 48th year, shot dead in a tavern in Baltimore. A petty argument over a girl. And I leave it up to you to decide whether he had discovered the secret of life. You, who are dead and gone, and who exist only in these images my mind has so carefully constructed. You've had enough of me by now. You think I'm one off. I know. All right then. Have it your way. A new day has arrived, and I feel as if I'm clutching at the air. In the garden, the butterflies hover like sleepwalkers. The scarlet tanager has alighted at the feeder. I haven't seen him in quite some time, but I know he knows my secret. You will just have to figure it out for yourself. Thank you.
Yeah. Man, thank you, Brian.
Thanks a lot.
Brian, I loved your protagonist, and you are such a lovely reader. The sound of your voice is just wonderful to hear. Thank you so much for that. I really liked your protagonist.
Thanks.
Reminded me of Truman Capote has a wonderful reading of A Christmas Memory, and it was very evocative.
Yeah, I love to read. This is terrific. Thanks.
I like too that this is part of a novel, but it really stands alone too. I think that really
yeah, probably some of this is probably kind of confusing. It makes this is towards the end of the book, so there's some things in here that are clearer when you've read the book.
Yeah, no, it absolutely stands on its own too.
Yeah, these are nice trailers for your novel. You know, oh, is this a different book? Oh, so this is one book. Awesome.
Hey, are you talking about Watertown, New York, or Boston?
Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, the three women that are mentioned here are actually all the same woman, and they're his ex-wife, which is clear when you get to that part.
Wow. Spoilers.
Okay, enough.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. I believe, Christine, you are up next.
Okay, I was going to keep working on my short story, but I have been slammed at work, so I'm just going to read part of my novel that I wrote like 10 years ago. So it's early November 1893 in Paris, France. Retired Commandant Eugene Picard studied the faces sitting around his dining room table. Louis Granier and Philip Montesquieu he did not scrutinize, as they were longtime friends of his. Granier, with his balding round head and white beard, reminded him of Father Christmas. Montesquieu had a long face and highly arched white eyebrows that gave him the constant expression of a man who had just misplaced his wallet. They were flaneurs, Parisian dandies who had copious amounts of time and money, and strolled the city streets, poking their noses into anything and everything that tasted of excitement. They were harmless, really. The other two men he did not know, but could tell from their appearance that they were uncomplicated fellows who looked for a simple life and wanted to be left alone to live it. Merchants by trade, their large forearms, wide bellies, and broad shoulders were a mixture of heredity combined with years of hard labor and an honest woman's cooking. Unless Picard was missing something, these men were safe enough. Ironically, it was the young Lieutenant Gustave Clement who made him uneasy. He had heard of the ambitious Clement of the Boulevard du Palais precinct many months before and knew it was really he and not Granier, as he was first told, who had initiated this meeting. They had gathered to address better ways of maintaining public order without the hindrance of official procedures. In the past few years, violence in Paris was rising. Just 2 years before, demonstrations held by socialists over workers' rights exploded into violence on May Day. The following year saw a rise in anarchism as Revachol became a type of radical hero for bombing the residence of the Prince of Sagan and a few other residences before he was captured. That summer, student protest over a model's clothing resulted in the Latin Quarter being blockaded. The students, feeling the police were overbearing, took their complaint to the Chamber of Deputies the next day, but even though the deputies promised to remand the offending officers, the students stoned the precinct that night, and a fight ensued that left several policemen and students hurt and one man dead. In recent months, a rash of new anarchist bombings were occurring around the city, making many Parisians speculate that a new revolution was at hand. Action was necessary to turn the tide, but it must be discreet action. Clement, as far as Picard could tell, seemed to be a man more determined to feather his nest with accolades than dispel the violence. Imagine wearing his police uniform to this inconsequential meeting, and the way he waxed that ridiculous mustache. Clement's blonde hair was slicked back and shoes polished to a high shine, as if he were paying homage to the military hospital and not visiting a farmhouse at the outskirts of the city as he was. The uniform would surely set the neighbors talking if they saw him. If they did not guess the political implications of the visit, Picard feared they might assume his wife, Nanette, had finally succumbed to her illness and official respects were being paid. He watched with some distaste as Clement fidgeted with his uniform. "And how is your wife, Picard?" Grenier asked, as if he were reading his friend's thoughts, and looked curiously over the commandant's shoulder to the closed bedroom door behind them. Picard rose from his chair to open a bottle of wine. "Not well, I'm afraid. They think she might last the month, but we are hoping." His voice trailed off, and he made a feeble gesture that fell into the awkward, confused silence. He didn't know what he was hoping for, really. It was a little over a year ago, just when the leaves started to change, that Nanette began coughing up blood. Tuberculosis was diagnosed and her struggle progressed slowly, growing more intense by the day, overtaking her vitality like some strange parasite that robbed her of her soul and left a paper-thin shell of a body behind. No one thought she would last this long, and Boucard hated to admit it, but for the last 2 weeks, every morning that her eyes opened, he felt more despair than comfort. Montesquieu said soothingly, "We must have faith." But Boucard found more consolation in attending to the wine bottle. Any small task was a welcome distraction, which is perhaps why he agreed to this meeting in the first place. It would be a relief to concentrate on anything outside of his home, even if the subject matter was not the most pleasant. Grenier gave Boucard a subtle smile of knowing friendship designed to relax his friend, then overtly directed his attention to the frosted window and said conversationally, "We are fortunate today that the coach continues service to the city until late this evening. It will not be a night for an open carriage." The guests murmured acknowledgement that faded into another awkward silence. Boucard finally peeled off the seal of the bottle and was twisting a corkscrew into the top. "I am sorry to hear of your wife's unfortunate illness." Clement's gesture oozed insincerity and irritated Boucard, but the young officer didn't seem to notice and kept talking. "Which is why we are very grateful that you would have us around to your house, considering the extent of the business we need to discuss, and your wife's circumstances. I told Grenier that we should meet at my flat, and I told him that I didn't want to leave my house." Boucard's eyes became steel at the young man's impertinence of pressing into the business at hand without the proper civilities and pleasantries being passed first. "It is impossible to determine my wife's condition for the next hour, much less the next afternoon." Yes, that's what Grenier explained," Clement interjected quickly, "which is why I was saying it was very noble of you to have us around to your house. The city will be very indebted to you for your services." Boucard gritted his teeth and pulled the cork from the bottle with a hint of animosity. Montesquieu intervened, turning the subject back to socially courteous topics. "I hear Nanette's daughter is here to help." Boucard slowly poured wine into Grenier's glass. "Yes, she has been with us since last Christmas. She came down from St. John's." "She's a nun then?" the ironmonger asked, reaching for a dried fig and some nuts from the bowl in the center of the table. Boucard shook his head and took another glass in his hand to fill. "I'm afraid she has no inclination for the life of the church. She teaches young girls at the Abbey, reading history lessons, I understand." Grenier waved to fly away from his wine, and Boucard watched as it flew around and came to rest on the light fixture glowing above the table. It turned downwards and rubbed its two front legs together, as if contemplating its next attempt. Montesquieu was talking. Boucard was very generous with Annette's daughter when they were married. The girl's father had left the women with so little upon his death, and Boucard knew any marriage hopes for the young girl would be scarce, so he sent Sabine to the Abbey at a young age. She comes to visit twice a year. "These public schools now, they are good choices," the butcher Andre said, tasting his wine tentatively, "and it's this sort of thing that keeps society stable." "But certainly public schools will help us little when it comes to these anarchists," Clement pushed in quickly, irritated that the butcher brushed against the subject that he wanted to command that evening. Boucard stopped pouring for a moment, looked dubiously at Clement and said flatly, "It is my understanding that we are meeting tonight to discuss measures on how to improve the safety of Paris. I wasn't aware we were going after any particular political group." This outright denial obviously shook Clement, who must have realized he'd made a regrettable political blunder. I'm done.
Yay!
I like the soundless clapping.
Yeah. So we can say the word clap as we do this because it doesn't hurt as much. Well, thank you, Christine. That sounded, I just want to hear more. Just keep going.
So is that a finished novel, and where does this fall in the novel?
I was clicking my, it's the opening chapter of my master's project, and I got 9/10 finished with it and then stopped.
Oh no. Cool. Yeah, excellent. I definitely want to hear more.
I love the
Yeah.
names. The names. Grenier, what was his name?
Yeah, Grenier. And I was going to say it'd be easier if I could speak French, but they're all French names and I can't speak French.
It's okay. Could have fooled me. It's such a wonderful name.
Thank
Christine, your writing voice, I miss it. It's wonderful. I recognized it from the master's program. I just loved it.
Thank you, Margie.
Need us to write recommendations?
Yep. Well, please come back, and if you don't think of anything else to do, just keep going with this. Just serialize it like David Copperfield. We'll pay attention. I believe Anita Collins is up next.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
What a coinky dink.
So this is from a very not complete work in progress, but it is the beginning of a story that I'm working on, or it's probably more likely to be a novella if I ever can finish it. But the working title is currently Skinny Fingers Blues. I changed it as of yesterday. It was a different title, but this is what it is today. Preston hit rewind and then play. It was faint, but damn it, there it was. Quiet, like an Alan Lomax recording playing just under audible volume. A blues riff twanging on an old-style guitar, and then half a minute in, the raspy growl of a voice. Preston could have sworn the voice was saying, "You gonna cry." Preston was mystified. His studio was in the basement, surrounded by solid earth. No way could music be leaching onto the recording. The room had one small window up high near the ceiling, but it was covered with 6 inches of baffling and 2 inches of acoustic panel. Every inch of wall was covered with acoustic foam, and wool carpets were hung over that, and the floor was covered in 2 layers of carpets. Overkill, maybe, but Preston didn't believe in shortcuts. The only hard surfaces in the room were the desk, the recording equipment, and the racks it was sitting on. The place was silent as the grave, except for when musicians came in to be recorded, which meant it was silent most of the time. Still, there were artifacts on the recording, and those artifacts sounded like a man with a guitar. It was 5 a.m. Preston rubbed his eyes and stretched, trying to work out the kinks of his sore back. He'd been hunched over the panel since yesterday morning, and he still had no clue where the artifacts were coming from. The sun would be up soon, so there's no point in going to bed. A couple of hours sleep would just make him groggy and irritable, and he needed every ounce of patience to get through the session with Samantha Person, who was coming in at 10 to record her B-side. Samantha Person, or Sammy, as she liked to call herself, producing her vanity record was a chamber of hell designed especially for him. He thought the project would generate some quick cash to keep his studio afloat. $1,000 to bring the kid in for a couple of takes, do a quick edit, auto-tune her vocals beyond recognition, slap on some reverb, done. What he hadn't counted on was that Sammy had never sung outside the shower. She couldn't remember the lyrics long enough to make it through a take, and she couldn't stay on pitch if her life depended on it. Oops, she'd say, giggly and breathless, tilting her head towards her shoulder in a way that was supposed to melt Preston's heart, but that made him want to smack her. By this point, he'd listened to the song, a pre-haircut Miley Cyrus tune called My Heart Beats for Love, so often he'd caught himself humming it in the shower. Preston turned off the equipment and headed up the stairs, flipping the light switch off behind him. He pulled on his running shoes and called Max. A run would clear his head and maybe shake an idea loose. He fastened Max's leash and they hit the sidewalk at full speed. Despite having 0 sleep, it felt great to get his blood moving. The sky was gray and a stiff breeze was twisting the leaves on the trees. It felt amazing to be out of the house and soaking up the daylight, weak as it was. Inheriting this house, one with a nearly soundproof basement in a town where basements are unheard of, was a sign. His Uncle Mike, the only person on the planet who understood him, left it to him. His Uncle Mike, who had been hit by a train. Seriously. Folks in town said the crossing lights were flashing before Uncle Mike set foot on the tracks. Halfway across, he dropped his phone, bent to pick it up, and that was that. A reporter from the Press Register came out to try to make a story out of it, thinking Uncle Mike was on drugs or suicidal, but he couldn't get traction. Preston and the rest of the town knew that Uncle Mike was just lost in his head, dreaming up a song. Mike used to say that he did his best writing on his feet. He probably hadn't even noticed the lights or even the sound of the oncoming train. Fat raindrops were hitting the windows when he and Max came in the back door. Preston checked his phone and saw that someone had texted him about the Naugahyde recliner he'd listed on Craigslist. It was amazing what people were willing to pay for as long as you used keywords like retro and mid-century. He'd also missed a call from Monique and one from Russell Livesey, a musician who'd taken him up on his free trial session. That was Monique's idea. Entice musicians in with a free trial, and they'd be hooked on his ear, his creativity, and his dedication to the perfect sound. Preston played Russell's voicemail. Got your call, man. Thanks for following up. You got a good thing going there, but, well, I'm going to work with Dave Medlin over in Muscle Shoals. Best of luck to you, though. Yeah, thought Preston. Best of luck to me. I can't believe I'm doing this, Max, Preston said. Sammy and company had gone finally with 4 hours of tape for Preston to go through. He and Max were in the studio with Max laying at his feet. Oddly, though, when Preston first called him, Max wouldn't come down the stairs. When he finally did come down, instead of curling up in his usual spot of sofa, Max was laying at his feet instead of Preston tried to not read too much into it. An idea had come to him while he and Max were running. A crazy idea, but he'd used up all the sane ones. He was going to record the ambient noise of the studio overnight. If somehow, somewhere, someone was, well, anyway, he'd see what happened. Preston sat at the console for a moment longer. He stacked his notebook, pens, and coffee cup as if he were expecting company, and then he flipped the switch to start recording. He got up and pushed in his chair, and Max immediately went to the closed door. Preston walked out the door and up a few stairs and came back and turned off the overhead, leaving the studio dimly lit with a string of Christmas lights. He closed the door behind him and walked up the stairs. The living room was hit by the moon, and Max was in his usual spot under the window looking out. Preston was too keyed up to go to bed, so he didn't know what to do with himself. There was no way sound could leak downstairs through the solid wood floors and a foot of insulation and several layers of baffling, but he didn't want to turn on the television or play music, just to be sure, just to be absolutely sure. He'd just take a walk around the house to make sure no one was blasting music, and Max hadn't been out in a while anyway. Let's take a walk, Maxie, what do you say? So they went out the door and Max jumped off the porch, but waited for Preston in the yard. After the slam of the screen door, Preston paused on the porch to listen. The predominant sound was the rise and fall of the cicadas, a strong, shrill presence. Behind him, he heard the small staccato thumps of bugs hitting the porch light. The air was soft and cool, a beautiful September night. If Monique were here, they'd be sipping wine on the porch swing. Preston stepped off the porch and onto the lawn. The street in front of the house was dark and quiet, and street lamps glowed every 100 yards or so. A couple of bats were catching their dinner around the street lamp closest to him. An owl called behind the house. Far away towards Government Street, he heard a siren wailing, sad and lonesome. A few doors down, someone's screen door smacked, and he heard the clink and rattle of a bag of garbage being tossed in the bin. Preston looked up and saw that the moon was full. He laughed. Of course the moon was full tonight. Max bolted toward the sidewalk, assuming they were going for a run, but then came back to Preston as he turned toward the side yard. Max sensed that something was up and got serious, walking a few paces ahead of Preston, head down, sniffing the grass and flower beds. Preston walked slowly toward the side of the house, pausing every few steps to listen until he reached the basement window. He stood quiet and closed his eyes, and Max came to stand next to him. The only sounds were the usual night noises, no neighbor stereo or musician rehearsing. Preston laughed and ran his hand through his hair. The tape wasn't going to pick up anything. Of course it wasn't. He'd been spending too much time alone, lost in old memories and worries. He needed to get out more. He would just go down and turn everything off. But since it was all set up, he might as well let it run tonight, just in case. In the morning, he'd put this craziness to bed. When Preston woke up the next morning, he couldn't say he'd gotten the best sleep of his life. Vague images from stress dreams were still floating around the edges of his brain. Monica with her bags packed, Max being hit by a car, being stuck in the dark studio and not being able to pull the door open. Nothing a few mugs of coffee wouldn't cure. Once he poured his coffee, Preston went down to the studio. It'll be nothing, he said to himself. Dead air, lots and lots of dead air. He pressed play, and for about 15 seconds, there was silence. Then a gravelly voice said, "Hello, Preston." That's all I have so far. I love it. I love the start of that story. The way you pull into that narrative is really good. It has you gripped right at the first. So I enjoyed that.
How much longer do you think it'll be?
Well, I haven't even, I was like, the good thing about doing these readings, it forces me to really focus. So I've already cut out like several pages of content, and I'm realizing as I'm reading, it's like, oh, there's other things I need to cut. But I do think it's going to be about probably 15,000 words. So I have a whole bunch of stuff with the musician that gets recorded on the, and lots of dialogue there. And I like that part best, so we'll see.
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Please continue. Oh, hush. It's my stopwatch. So Anita Collins, thank you for joining us. And I believe, Margie, you are up next.
Yay.
Oh, I apologize. I'm still at school and I have a lot of technical issues going here. My personal laptop wasn't working. And so I've tried to rig something up here. I didn't want to touch my camera, my phone, because I didn't want to interrupt anybody's reading. But I wasn't able to comment either because I didn't want to touch it. But I thoroughly enjoyed your readings, and Anita and Brian and Eric's music. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here. So I have two poems that I would like to read. And I'll just say that almost 10 years ago, I was working in a deli, and I met a bunch of people that we decided that I just thoroughly enjoyed. And we decided that we would teach each other some skills, right? And so I was teaching a little bit about poetry, and somebody else was teaching a little bit about photography, and a third person was teaching a little bit about canoeing. And so I wrote these two poems about our canoeing adventure. One of them I wrote at the beginning, and the other one I wrote at the end. So at the beginning, I had never canoed before, and I was 50, and I wanted to do something really out of my comfort zone. And so that's what I did. And I did that with my deli friends. So this is the first poem, and it is called My Response to Your River Talk, or Why I Was Quick to Say I'd Canoe to the Coast. And it goes like this. Water is bigger in winter. In my mind's eye, the Neuse River rushes through sparse vegetation. Falls and boisterous bends of white caps push us past the ills of winter, flu, bills, and humdrum days. I have equipment and a tandem canoe. We camp, put in on flat water, paddle, ponder the rocks and ruts we leave behind. The sun freckles muscled shoulders, shimmers a path to the past before we were married or harried by choice and chance. I have a crazy idea. At Pamlico Sound, where river meets tide, I confide when I was a girl, brackish and brown as the estuary, I'd race to the river, catch grasshoppers on the way, cast them to the water and fish, and wish to row to a shore where life is never ordinary. That's one poem. And then we did canoe. The three of us, we canoed 50 miles of the Neuse River. It was quite an accomplishment. And in that time, one of my friends asked that I write a poem that he could put on the side of his canoe. So this one is titled "For the Bow of Michael's Canoe." And he had a red solo canoe that he called the Starship. And I asked him, why do you want me to write on your canoe? Tell me something about your canoe. And he said, well, look at it. She's so sexy. So I wrote this for him. It goes like this. Starship, you sexy vessel, beckon, and at water's edge, I push off, pull the bow line and paddle. The river, dark, dimpled, tarnished by tannins. Stealth, seductive, you whisper over pebbles, under stars, and ease me toward winding channels, shallow streams, uncharted dreams. Beyond the cares and chaos of sullied days. In deep waters, we drift, lulled by tenuous tugs, tides in the distance. With my head against the deck, heels upon the gunwale, prone, cradle, caressed, I float, find the water with my fingertips, feel you coax me toward the sea with winsome ploys and parting kiss. That's my poems.
That's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. It's fun to read.
I love your cadence and your voice, Margie. I really love to hear. I miss your stuff. That's great.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's really, really good. I sort of wish that you could read them again because it's hard to absorb. Like poetry is just not something you can hear once and really get.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Well, we're recording this, so this will go up. So just fast forward to 58 minutes and do it as many times as you like.
A lot of writers here.
Then that'll be the end, and we'll see you guys, I hope, on March 17th.
Mm-hmm.
So this here song, and I don't know whether you guys, I didn't bring my nice mic, so does this sound like a guitar to you guys? Or does it sound like a kazoo underwater? Okay. So this song is, I wrote this, there's a method of songwriting or even poetry called the Translitic Method, where you take a poem that's written in a language that you don't understand, but that you can at least make some sort of phonetical sense out of. Like if it was in some sort of Cyrillic language, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it. But this was from a poem that was written in Gaelic, and I just looked at these words and kind of Rorschach them into things that made them sound like words that I would say, you know, like teeter-totter, nose, hopscotch, piano pouch, something like that. So I ended up with a set of words and just revised it and revised it and revised it. And so this is the song that came out of it. It's called Jabberwockies. And I'm going to pull the words up so that I have a security blanket. But it goes like this. Relax your eyes, proudly see it. It's always there. A couple of angels, a bunch of monsters everywhere you look. You just have to wait. Keep an eye on where the Jabberwockies go. Watch them slither down the hidey holes they know. You won't have to wait for long. Inspiration's gone. If they even want to talk to us, we haven't tried to raise them for so long. So brush the panic off your face and start the van. Make out like you never saw it, but you can now. Grab whatever you can burn to keep you warm. Grab a finger in the air when there's a storm coming. If you're not careful, it'll all get to feel like normal again. You won't have to wait for long. You won't have to wait for long. Won't have to wait for long. You won't have to wait for long. You won't have to wait for long. You won't have to wait for long. All right.
Good song.
Excellent.
Well, y'all, that's going to be, I believe that's it for us today for the February 17th edition of the virtual open mic here at the Chatham Community Library. I sure appreciate everybody showing up, and please come around next time.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you, Wes.
All
Thank
right.
you, Christine.
Good to see everybody.
Ryan, Marie, Margie, Anita, Eric.
I'll see you next month.
All right.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please come and
I will. Thank
all
you.
right.
Bye.
Well, we
Bye.
will see you all
Thank you.
next month. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.